Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Most planes have an iron at about 45 degrees. It's fairly common and expected, but every now and then you come across something that's not. Let's take a look. Wooden body planes are really simple. It's a body, a wedge, an iron, and you're good to go. But in this case, it's the exact same thing, just a little different. It's a body, a wedge, and an iron, but the iron is bedded at that. How is that supposed to cut? So here's the iron. It looks like a fairly standard iron from the side and from the bevel, but when I flip it over to the flat back, it's not flat. There's all these ridges, and these were actually originally punched in, just like an old file, one by one, to create these slots in the back, and then they were ground down flat, but not smooth, and that gives you all of these tiny little teeth along the edge. And don't worry, we are actually going to be looking at this under a microscope in a little bit, so hang on. And then when we use it, we don't get beautiful little curls, we get all this wiry junk that comes out of there. And this is the surface it leaves. It's really, honestly, kind of gross, but it is relatively flat. It's just not smooth, and you've got all those lines in there. What is going on with this thing? And there's a couple big benefits to this tooth with the high angle. Number one, if you know anything about hand planes, you know at a higher angle, they tend to crush the curl in front of the iron, and that gives you actually a little bit better of a cut in difficult grain. Number two, with those teeth, you have little blade, no blade, little blade, no blade, and that means that you're not going to be getting tear out that runs across the board. So this leaves almost no tear out. It just happens to leave those little lines behind. But that begs the question, why do you want those lines? This is a knot in some white oak, and here the grain goes down, and then it comes up, and then it goes down, and then it comes up, and then it goes down, it comes up, and it comes down, all the way through this little section. If you ever tried to smooth this out, this would be a pain. But if I take my toothing plane and I traverse across the grain, and I go from one side to the other, and then I come back and I go at a slightly different angle in the other direction, I can actually flatten this surface out with the plane, and because I'm taking all those little teeth at a really high angle, I'm not leaving any tear out. Just that little bit of line work. That means I can come into the card scraper and just do a few passes to get rid of those lines, and I can very quickly get down to a really nice smooth surface that has zero tear out at all. But wait, there's more. The other benefit that this can do is that it leaves that textured surface on there. And that textured surface is great for veneer work. For hundreds and thousands of years, high glue is about the only glue you would ever use to apply one board to another. And if you get down to really thin pieces, well, then you have another problem because the moisture in the air can actually get through those thin pieces and break down the glue pretty quickly. And high glue is very susceptible to moisture and temperature, and if you put a cup on top, and it allowed all of that thin veneer to start to peel up, which you really don't want. And then if you ever got into marquetry, you have all these tiny little pieces with different color coming together to make a mosaic on top of your surface. In that case, it's even worse, and high glue just is not great at it because it can be affected by moisture and temperature, and if you're not in an air-conditioned environment, that can be a problem. And that is where the toothing plane enters the chat. The toothing plane can give you a surface on there that is flat, but yet still has a lot of texture in it, and that texture is fantastic for holding on to hide glue. So if I go over my surface with a toothing plane and leave some texture, and then I take the same toothing plane and I go over my veneer as well, I now have two mating surfaces that are flat, but not smooth. They are very rough to the touch, and they bond very nicely with any adhesive you're going to be using. And that bond between the two is actually much, much stronger because there's a mechanical connection between the two. But if you act fast, I'll throw in the scrub plane action with your toothing plane order. That's right, the toothing plane can kind of be used like a scrub plane. If you're cutting through rough and gnarly wood, the toothing plane doesn't care what the surface is because all those little teeth cut tiny little channels. Now it's going to be slower. This is really, really fast and very, very gnarly. But this is slow and very gnarly. And so a lot of people actually use this just like they would use a scrub plane, especially if you have wild figured grain or wood that likes to do weird things. This, you can go at it all day long and still have a great surface after you're left over. Just quickly hit it with the card scraper and you're good to go. And even better, these are really, really easy to set up. They're not fiddly like your smoothing plane. In this case, you put it in, bevel down just like before. You slide in your wedge, which most of these are, and if there's no wedge, you just do it like a normal metal plane. You want to make sure the plane is flat on the surface, the iron is flat down on the surface as well. Then you set in your wedge and you give it a little tap. And it's basically set. Usually that little tap is going to push the iron forward just a little bit, and now, just like that, it's ready to go. There's no fuss or muss. You just set it flat on the surface, set the iron down flat on the surface, tap it, and it's done. That's all the setting it needs. And it works. But how exactly do you go about sharpening this thing? Aren't those teeth going to cause you a problem? And the answer is no. Actually, it's the exact same. Except for you're not going to hit the back much. You don't touch the back. Once it's flat and done, you don't hit it again because you don't want to take those ridges out. You just put it flat on the bevel like you normally would and you sharpen it. Just like you normally would. Each one of those teeth is going to create a tiny little burr on each one of those little teeth, and you come over the strop and you take it off the exact same way. It's just when you flip it over to do the burr the other way, you make sure you're going in line with your ridges, and you can work that burr off and sharpen it just like a normal iron. It just looks weird. Here's actually a microscope view looking right on the tooth. And each one of these were hand punched, and you can see the flat is a slightly different size on each one, but they were punched in and then sharpened flat again. And so that little bit there is the cutting edge, and there's a large chunk in between each that is open. And here it is looking at it from the bevel side. You can see what's actually doing the cutting. It's kind of surprising the way that works. Now, there aren't many modern versions of this available. There are a few. Lie-Nielsen make ones, Veritas makes one, and there are a couple companies that make the irons, but they're not very common. And it's one of those things that unless you're in veneer work, you're probably not going to need one of these, because if you're going in really terrible tear out, you can set up a smoother to do the same thing. And then you don't have to hit it with a card scraper again. But this takes a lot of work to get dialed right in and set up perfectly. Whereas this takes almost no work. You set the iron into the body, you give it a good tap with the wedge, and just like that, you've got a plane that is all set to go on figured wood. But you then have to hit it with a card scraper. So, pros and cons for each. But this is a lot of fun, and every now and then I like to pull it out because it's just an interesting tool to play with. When it comes to the antiques, they're a little bit harder to find, but not that much. You come across them at most MWTCA tool meets, and you can find them at several online sellers. And if you are looking for something specific, go to handtoolfinder.com, handtoolfinder.com. And on there we have a resource for different places where you can buy antique hand tools online, as well as a list of trusted sellers. And you'll be able to find quite a few of these on there. It's a plane that doesn't have a lot of uses, but it is a very fun tool to use, and if you pull it out, it's kind of interesting to show people, and they're like, wow, what is that? Why is it at such a high angle? Why does it have those teeth on there? Because it has a very specific use, and what it does very, very well. A lot like a lot of the other hand tools. It's not a jack of all trades, because a jack of all trades doesn't do many very well. In this case, it does 1 or 2 or 3 jobs actually relatively well, and that's better than a lot of tools in this shop. Now, I know I kind of brushed over it, and there's lots of other little things I could talk about the toothing plane. It is a very interesting tool, and if you'd like me to go more into it in the future, maybe I'll do a live video and go into depth on it longer, but we'll see how that goes. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, throw those in the comments down below, because those do help out the channel anytime you like, comment, share, subscribe, and all those fun things. Yes. But particularly, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone scrolling over there on the side. Those are the fantastic, wonderful, benevolent, gorgeous, and amazing people over on Patreon, because we are completely sponsored by you. Without you, well, we would not be here, and I would have to talk about some mattress company or a VPN or other things like that, and I don't want to do that. So thank you for that, because of all those people there. I think that'll do it for now, and until next time, have a wonderful day. Unlike most hand planes, there is no dragon version of this, because this one is definitely not toothless.